When Aaron Whitmore, a 23-year-old Harvard graduate, disappeared in January 2020, the media barely blinked. One article in the Boston Globe called it a possible mental health episode. Another from the New York Times suggested he may have run away to find himself. But what if Aaron didn't run? What if he was silenced? Aaron wasn't just another overachiever with a tech startup dream. He was a whistleblower. And the information he claimed to have could have dismantled the legacy of the most powerful Ivy League university in the world. Before he vanished, Aaron sent a Dropbox link to 5 close friends. Inside, a collection of audio recordings, internal emails, and financial spreadsheets. One file was labeled the Blood Money Program. He had always been the type to ask uncomfortable questions. His professors admired him, but behind closed doors, they worried about his obsession with a particular alumni donor, a billionaire hedge funder named Malcolm Vaughn. Vaughn, who held several honorary degrees and funded entire buildings on campus, was once implicated in insider trading. But Aaron claimed that Vaughn's financial contributions were linked to something far worse: illegal clinical testing on vulnerable groups overseas, under Harvard's own medical grant programs. The theory was outrageous. But Aaron had documents that linked Vaughn's foundation to a biotech lab in Romania and another in Bangladesh, where underage orphans were reportedly subjected to unapproved drug trials. Harvard's name was on every grant approval. The funding chain, though cleverly routed through shell companies, ended at the office of sponsored programs on campus. His close friend Marissa, who was also one of the 5 people to receive the Dropbox link, said Aaron looked pale and paranoid in the days leading up to his disappearance. He told me, "If anything happens to me, do not trust anyone from the administration, especially not Professor Lang." Professor Richard Lang, Aaron's former mentor and head of bioethics at Harvard, was known for his sharp intellect and strict moral stance. But Aaron believed Lang was the gatekeeper of the entire operation, someone who approved what went public and what didn't. The night before he vanished, Aaron was seen arguing with someone outside the Widener Library. Campus CCTV footage showed him walking quickly across Harvard Yard with his backpack slung over one shoulder. At 2:47 a.m., he entered his dorm room. At 5:12 a.m., he walked out again, this time without his bag or laptop. He was never seen again. His phone pinged one final time at a rest stop on I-95, just outside New Haven, Connecticut. Then nothing. No purchases, no calls, no GPS data. The official police report concluded that Aaron may have experienced voluntary disappearance due to stress. But stress doesn't erase someone from the face of the earth. Marissa tried to open the Dropbox link again weeks later. It had been wiped clean. Every file, every folder, gone. She claimed she hadn't even clicked download when she first opened it. "I thought I'd have time to go through it properly. I thought he was just being dramatic." Within months, 2 other friends who received the same link reported their devices behaving strangely. One said their hard drive crashed, and a strange process called ghost_admin.exe appeared in their system logs. Another said their iCloud account was accessed from Washington, D.C., even though they were in Boston at the time. No one wanted to talk after that. By April, the entire story was buried. Harvard issued a quiet memorial service for Aaron and referred to him as a bright light extinguished too soon. But they never acknowledged the whistleblowing. They never addressed the link between Vaughn's donations and the shady medical experiments. They just moved on. But here's the thing. 2 months after Aaron's disappearance, Malcolm Vaughn quietly stepped down from the board of his own foundation. His resignation letter cited health reasons. No press conference, no public statement. And when a journalist from The Guardian tried to follow up, the office said, "Mr. Vaughn is currently traveling and unavailable for comment." One of the surviving files from the Dropbox leak, saved by someone who screenshotted portions of it before it was deleted, was a redacted email chain. In it, a senior Harvard administrator referenced a compliance issue involving a research subject mortality rate. The subject line? "Handle swiftly. This cannot leak." Someone clearly didn't want Aaron's story out. Isn't it strange how a kid goes missing after uncovering international ethics violations, and the only people who seem interested are Reddit sleuths and conspiracy podcasts? Harvard's reputation remains spotless. Vaughn's foundation still funds scholarships under a different name, and no one has been charged. But the scariest part isn't just that Aaron vanished. It's that everyone who cared stopped asking. What if everything he claimed was true? What if he wasn't the first to disappear? And what if Harvard is still running programs right now, with someone else's name on the paperwork? 3 months after Aaron vanished, Marissa received a brown envelope at her apartment in Cambridge. No return address, no postage mark. Inside was a single USB drive, wrapped in aluminum foil. She hesitated, heart pounding. Plugging it into an air-gapped laptop, she discovered 3 audio recordings and a PDF titled Program Overview. Tier 1. Consent Exemptions. The recordings were short but devastating. In the first, a voice, Aaron's, spoke in a hushed tone, as if hiding from someone. I have proof that minors are being used in these trials. Not just overseas. Right here, in New Jersey, at a private facility linked to Vaughan Biotech. Harvard calls it a third-party contractor, but the funding and the paperwork, it all matches. I tried going to Lang. He told me to drop it. Said, some things are above your clearance. I think he knew I recorded him. The second recording was even more disturbing. Aaron had secretly recorded a meeting with 2 graduate students who were conducting research under Professor Lang. In the background, you could hear the sounds of muffled typing and whispers. One voice said, the trial didn't go as expected. 3 subjects pulled out. 1 died. Another responded, we didn't report that to the review board. Dr. Lang said it would compromise the funding cycle. That line alone could have ended careers. But without Aaron, without someone to verify the origin, the drive would be dismissed as a hoax. Yet Marissa couldn't shake the gut feeling that everything was real. The final recording was the shortest, just under 45 seconds. It sounded like Aaron was speaking on the phone. If I disappear, I didn't run. Don't let them say I lost it. I didn't lose anything. They took it. Marissa brought the drive to a lawyer in Boston who specialized in whistleblower protection. The man looked over the files carefully. You need to disappear, he said flatly. This isn't about journalism. It's about liability. If this gets out, Harvard, Vaughan, Lang, this could be catastrophic. That's why it won't get out. They'll bury you before they let it reach daylight. One of the chilling moments came weeks later when she noticed her building's superintendent had changed. The new guy, heavy-set, military haircut, seemed overly interested in her comings and goings. Her mail started arriving late. Once, she caught him fiddling with the fire alarm outside her apartment. When confronted, he gave her a look, cold, unblinking, and walked away without answering. Then came the email. It was from a dummy Proton Mail account and simply read, "Curiosity is not a survival trait. Neither is loyalty to the dead. Drop it." The story would have ended there, another unsolved case, had it not been for a curious detail uncovered by a freelance journalist from Canada named Nolan Keene. While researching medical grants for a separate exposé, Nolan stumbled on a series of overlapping IP addresses, Harvard's Office of Global Health Initiatives, and a now-defunct shell company registered in Zurich. The company was called Lumavox Therapeutics. It had no website, no contact number, and no CEO listed. But Nolan found that one of its internal project names was Whitmore. The last access date, February 1st, 2020, 3 days after Aaron disappeared. When Nolan tried to access Harvard's public-facing clinical research database, he found multiple trials with redacted locations and 0 patient data. One was for an experimental immunotherapy that appeared to be fast-tracked without FDA clearance. The trial was listed as Tier 1, closed loop. In research jargon, that usually refers to trials where patient feedback isn't gathered, often because the subjects are unconscious, incapacitated, or unable to consent. The implications were sickening. Harvard's reputation as a global medical authority made it the perfect cover. No one would question a research grant with a university letterhead. And with Vaughan's billions funneling through obscure subsidiaries, accountability was almost impossible. When journalists sent FOIA requests, they were stonewalled with excuses about national security interests and intellectual property protections. Nolan attempted to meet with Marissa in person. She refused. "I don't want my face on this," she told him. "I'm already one step away from vanishing like Aaron." But she gave him a name, Dr. Evelyn Travers. Dr. Travers had worked briefly under Professor Lang and then relocated to a think tank in Geneva. Her LinkedIn profile was scrubbed clean, but through archived snapshots, Nolan discovered that she'd been part of the Vaughan Harvard Health Ethics Council, a group formed just months before Aaron vanished. When Nolan tracked her down in Switzerland, she refused to speak at first. But when he showed her a printout of Aaron's email chain, the one labeled "Handle swiftly," "This cannot leak," she froze. "You don't understand," she whispered. It was never about the science. It was about testing thresholds, finding out what they could get away with. Who would talk? Who would keep quiet? Aaron wasn't the first. The line haunted Nolan. Was Aaron just another data point? A test case? Before returning to Canada, Nolan received a text from a private number. It said, "You're right about most of it, but you're wrong if you think it's over." Nolan's apartment in Montreal was broken into a week later. Nothing was stolen, but every drawer, every file, was turned upside down. Whoever did it wasn't after valuables. They wanted to send a message. If Aaron was silenced, was Nolan next? Is the Ivy League now a front for something far darker? It took Nolan 3 weeks to decide whether to publish the story. He had everything: a narrative that tied Harvard, Von Biotech, and hidden clinical trials to a conspiracy of global scale. But without a living whistleblower, without Aaron, it was all circumstantial. Worse, every time he reached out to former students, interns, or research associates connected to Professor Lang, he got the same answer: "Don't contact me again." One even whispered, "They're watching." The final push came when Nolan received a package at a FedEx hub in downtown Montreal. No name on the return slip. Inside was a worn moleskine notebook and a note that read, "He trusted you. Finish what he started." The notebook was Aaron's. Every page was filled with scribbles, timestamps, diagrams, and cryptic symbols. One drawing showed a human brain connected by wires to a machine labeled Neurooptimizer, Tier 1. In red ink, Aaron had scrawled, "This is not just medicine, it's behavioral control." Nolan cross-referenced a code from one page, VXC1901, and found a 2018 Von Biotech patent for a neural implant designed to enhance cognitive performance in patients with degenerative disorders. But the patent also included unexplained segments labeled reactive protocol modules and external compliance interface. This wasn't medicine. It was manipulation. The next step was obvious. He needed to speak to Professor Lang directly. Using a conference registration as cover, Nolan traveled to Baltimore, where Lang was scheduled to speak at the Global Neuroethics Forum. The man took the stage with confidence, delivering a keynote titled "Pushing Boundaries with Responsibility." As he spoke, Nolan sat in the back, recording every word. But what shocked him wasn't the speech. It was the moment Lang stepped off the podium and noticed Nolan. His expression flickered. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. After the talk, Nolan cornered him in a hallway. "You knew Aaron Whitmore," he said coldly. Lang didn't blink. "Yes, a troubled but brilliant student. I was devastated when he vanished." Nolan leaned in. He didn't vanish. He was erased. Lang's demeanor shifted. "You don't know what you're playing with," he said softly. "There are safeguards for a reason. You journalists think exposure is the answer. But some truths destabilize everything. Like experimenting on unconsenting subjects." Nolan snapped. "Using Ivy League credibility to bypass regulation?" Lang stepped closer. "If you want a name on the record, you won't get one. But I'll give you this: it wasn't just Aaron. It started years ago, under a classified project, initially military. DARPA funded it. Vaughn developed it. Universities like ours? We were used as filters, legitimizers. They gave us money, told us it was for breakthroughs. But every breakthrough required a broken subject. It was more than Nolan had expected, but he didn't trust it. Was Lang trying to cleanse his conscience, or bait him? 2 days after returning to Montreal, Nolan's laptop was remotely wiped. He'd kept backups, but the message was clear: they were still watching. The next morning, Canadian intelligence showed up at his door, not to arrest him, but to discuss threats to national research security. They knew everything: the USB, the notebook, even the conversation with Lang. "You've entered a zone where journalism becomes geopolitical," one of them said. "Ask yourself, what's the cost of releasing this?" Nolan ignored the warnings. He published the story under the title "The Ivy Experiment: How America's Brightest Minds Became Pawns in an Illegal Global Trial." Within hours, the site hosting it crashed. So did his email. But the story had already spread. Reddit threads, Twitter reposts, underground forums. They dissected every paragraph. And then came the smear campaign. Harvard denied the allegations. calling the report an unverified conspiracy masquerading as journalism. Vaughn Biotech's legal team filed a lawsuit against Nolan for defamation. A viral video emerged claiming Nolan was a fraud who had fabricated sources to push a leftist agenda. The backlash was fast, brutal, and deliberate. But then, something unexpected happened. A man named Thomas Leland, a former DARPA contractor, released his own statement through an encrypted channel. The Ivygate report is true. I saw the early blueprints. The program was called Horizon Echo. It was designed to enhance decision-making in combat environments. The implants worked too well. Subjects began losing free will. Command-level overrides were possible through neurostimulus codes. We shut it down, or so I thought. The story exploded. Mainstream news couldn't ignore it anymore. CNN ran a special titled Harvard, Vaughn, and the Ethics of Power. Congress called for hearings. The Department of Health and Human Services launched an investigation into federally funded university trials. But no one found Aaron. Marissa fled the U.S., now living under a new name in Norway. She refused interviews. Nolan's life was forever altered. Constant surveillance, financial strain, and the knowledge that his words had triggered a war between transparency and control. And yet, the final twist came nearly a year later. A photo surfaced on a darknet message board. Grainy, time-stamped, dated just weeks before. It showed a man in a wheelchair, head shaved, staring blankly at the camera. He was being wheeled into an unmarked facility in Nevada. A Reddit user posted below, "Looks like our boy Aaron is still alive." But they broke him. Thousands of comments flooded in. Some said it was AI-generated. Others claimed it was a psyop. But deep in a Reddit thread, one user, NeuroGhost89, wrote, "He was the prototype. There are more now, hidden in plain sight, walking among you." Was Aaron the first human test subject of mind control in the Ivy League? Was it science? Or state-sponsored conditioning? You may never know. But if the world's most powerful minds can be hijacked in the name of progress, then the truth isn't just buried, it's engineered to vanish. And sometimes, it wears a Harvard degree.